This scene is directly followed by arguably the worst scene in the entire show.
You sure about that? You sure about that? You sure about that?
Okay, so normally I don't really do this kind of thing, but I watched this video and it really annoyed me with how ignorant this person was and how poorly he articulated his points. I've seen some of VillainTM's videos in the past and was mildly entertained by some of his rants, but during this SEO rant, anybody who's actually seen the show or read the novels would know that this guy is just talking out of his ass. That's not to say that because he criticized a show that I like, that somehow invalidates all of his previous videos, but this rant makes it pretty clear that a lot of his criticisms are just purely surface level and he doesn't actually look that deeply into things to gain a better understanding. Anybody can make fun of dog shit shows like King's Game and Talentless Nana, but when it comes to shows with actual merit like SAO, he makes it pretty clear to everybody that he lacks the media literacy to actually properly critique it. That's not at all to say SAO doesn't have any dumb shit. There's plenty to make fun of, but the arguments he gives are really bad. Normally it wouldn't bother me all that much, because to his credit, the anime does a pretty poor job articulating this scene, so this misconception is understandable. However, he said he went out of his way to research this scene, and as we're about to see, that's just blatantly not true, as he doesn't provide any sources and consistently commits the logical fallacy of appeal to ignorance, as well as failing to meet the burden of proof pretty much for all of his points.
Citation needed. Citation fucking needed.
Before we get started, I do want to say good on him for raising awareness to this GoFundMe to help this girl beat cancer. The fundraiser is already finished and I wasn't able to find any updates on the girl's story, but that is a very good thing that he did. I feel like I need to preface that because I don't want people to think that I'm just dogging on him because he made fun of a show that I enjoyed. I enjoy High School of the Dead and I thought his video on that was fine for the most part. I mean, I think we can all agree that High School of the Dead isn't exactly highbrow media. I just think he says some dumb shit spreading misinformation that needs correcting. The purpose of this video isn't to change his mind. He's allowed to like and dislike whatever he wants. I just want him to stop spreading bullshit. I wouldn't even care if it weren't for the fact that he said he researched this shit, which he very clearly didn't. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's just being ignorant, but if he's maliciously spreading misinformation that he knows is factually wrong, then he's being intellectually dishonest, making this entire segment of his video bad faith, and that shit needs to be called out.
Kirito obviously agrees to do this nigga, but is twerked on viciously in this fight. And this is where the bullshit starts. How is it possible that Asuna overrides the paralysis given to her by the creator, my nigga?
So this is why I don't believe him when he says he went out of his way to research how this happened. Because if he had actually done research like he said he did, then he would know about Incarnation. They give a brief explanation in the first novel how they were able to override the system with sheer willpower, and then they further elaborate upon it in Alicization. I actually do have a bunch of future videos planned that go a bit more in depth with how it works. But to sum it up, the system takes the memories of each Flucklight, quantum particles that make up the human consciousness or the soul, in the world and sends that data to the visualizer. If you have a strong enough willpower, you can alter the world itself based on your perception. Kayaba even says Incarnation surpasses the system itself. This is how Asuna was able to overcome the paralysis when nobody else could. In the novel, she even does this when rushing to save Kirito from Cardinal. Now I get that he hates SAO, so I don't expect him to go out of his way to read and watch a series he doesn't enjoy. However, he specifically says he researched the lore, which he makes very abundantly clear is not at all true. All he had to do was look up the SAO subreddit and he could have found his answer there. Or the SAO wiki. Hell, just ask ChatGPT and they'll give you an answer. Like, come on, bro. It's not that hard.
and she jumps in the way and gets struck by Akihiko Kayaba and dies. At this point, Kirito has lost all hope and is just barely fighting at this point as this nigga knocks the sword out his hand and stabs him in the gut. Now, this nigga's HP reaches 0 and it says you are dead. So how does this shit happen? And of course, this nigga comes back to life and he fucking one-shots Heathcliff and clears the game.
He doesn't come back to life. He delays his avatar getting deleted. What we see in the anime isn't actually happening on screen. It's happening in his head, like we see in episode 1 where he gets killed by the wild boar. Kirito hasn't fallen down. He's still standing. Kayaba isn't surprised by the fact that he got back up. He's surprised by the fact he hasn't been deleted yet. Again, the anime does a pretty poor job conveying this to the audience, so it is understandable how the scene gets misinterpreted, but even if that were the case, that wouldn't be inconsistent with how Incarnation works. In addition to that, we know there's a 10-second time limit until the nerve gear starts frying the user's brain, which is more than enough time for Kirito to act. And I know somebody in the comments is going to say, well, Asuna's avatar was deleted for longer than 10 seconds. She should be dead. No, she wasn't. This is a prime example of cinematic timing. We see this kind of shit happen all the time in popular series like Dragon Ball. So it shouldn't be a stretch to say that the same thing is happening here.
Like, I had to do research, my nigga.
No, you didn't.
And try to figure out how this even happened. Like, you would think if he had the revive stone, Heathcliff would not be surprised by this. He would be like, oh, okay, he got the resurrection stone. Guess I'll just kill you again. But no, he is taken back by this. So fuck out of here with the theory that he used the resurrection stone. That's bullshit.
Nobody's arguing that. That's just blatant straw manning. It was through Incarnation. Again, you would have known that if you had actually researched the lore like you said you did. You continuously commit the fallacy of alleged certainty throughout this entire video.
This is just plot armor nonsense. They wanted this nigga to win, and not even the game itself could get in the way of that. Like, this is so fucking stupid, I can't. But even if I granted you some plot armor bullshit for Kirito, how the fuck does Asuna live? She has nothing like that.
Yes, she does. Incarnation is granted to people who have a strong enough will. She does it twice in the novel to save Kirito. In the first instance, Kirito asks how she managed to cross such a large distance in such a short amount of time, and she jokingly says it was through the power of love, which actually isn't too far off from what actually happened. Pretty much every major character is using Incarnation throughout the majority of the War of Underworld arc, making it not just a physical battle, but also a battle of wills. This isn't an ability exclusive to Kirito. Now you can sit there and you can say that it's plot armor or plot contrived, which is fine. I'm not arguing against that, but it's a legitimate in-universe explanation. It's not a plot hole or Deus Ex Machina. This is a functioning mechanic that is consistent within the SAO universe. It's not breaking any rules, so it's fine. That's like saying Goku's Super Saiyan transformation on Namek, or Gohan's Super Saiyan 2 transformation during the Cell games are poorly written because they're plot contrived. When Neo from the Matrix does it, it's a cinematic masterpiece, but when Kirito does it, it's the worst piece of media ever. That's just a blatant double standard, and a prime example of Hume's guillotine.
So, did she just will her way into this half-ass in-game afterlife? Like, what?
Both Kirito and Asuna survive and are spared by Kayaba. He wanted the chance to talk to them before he died and gives them the reward of making it back to the real world for beating the game. And I know there are going to be people in the comments who will argue that shouldn't apply to Asuna because it was mainly Kirito who beat Heathcliff and not the both of them together as an actual group. But not only did Kayaba interpret their victory as a team effort, but on top of that, he was beaten within the 10-second time limit, so the nerve gear wouldn't have killed her at that point anyway.
And this scene is directly followed by arguably the worst scene in the entire show, narratively speaking.
No.
Because Akihiko Kayaba basically admits that he did this for no reason. Like, he just, I was a child and I thought it'd be cool to have a floating castle. Like, who put the bombs and the headset, my nigga?
He literally explains his motivation in the first episode.
Ultimately, my goal was a simple one. The reason I created Sword Art Online was to control the fate of a world of my design.
Like, come on, dog, I know you're better than this. You yourself even admit he dreamed about his castle ever since he was a child. So not only are you attempting to strawman his motivation, but you also just committed a contradictory proposition. That's an inconsistency as well as a non sequitur. You also seem to completely ignore that this moment ties into one of the themes of the show, which is finding meaning. Kayaba lost his meaning. Meanwhile, Kirito and Asuna found meaning in each other. I thought you would have known that since you seem pretty confident in your narrative analysis. Also, this is something I only just realized upon writing the script, but the struggle between conflicting wills during the War of the Underworld arc as well as Kayaba's philosophy actually draws very similar parallels to the philosophy of Judge Holden from the Blood Meridian. I could go on for hours about Judge Holden as a character, but for the sake of time, I'll just play these quick clips just to give you guys an idea of what he's about and how it plays into SAO.
Men are born for games, nothing else. Every child knows that play is nobler than work. Games of chance require a wager to have meaning at all. But trial of chance or trial of worth, all games aspire to the condition of war. For here, that which is wagered swallows up game, player, all. Suppose two men at cards with nothing to wager save their lives. A turn of the card will tell if he is to die at that man's hand or that man at his. What more certain validation of a man's worth could there be? The selection of one man over another is a preference absolute and irrevocable. This is the nature of war, whose stake is at once the game and the authority and the justification. Seen so, war is the truest form of divination. War is the ultimate game. It is the testing of one's will and the will of another within that larger will. War is God.
What makes the philosophy of the judge in Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian so horrifying? You've probably heard the expression, fear an old man in a young man's game. I think that there's an interesting corollary. So the Glanton gang is filled with exactly what you would expect, like thugs, goons, not the modern usage. The judge stands out from his counterparts because he's educated. He speaks a bunch of languages, he's been all over the world. He clearly had other prospects in life. He chose to be there in the violence and the chaos, and that makes his character particularly haunting because he views war as the ultimate game. It makes no difference what men think of war. War endures. As well, ask men what they think of stone. War was always here. Before man was, war waited for him. The ultimate trade awaiting its ultimate practitioner. No system is impervious to violence. No argument survives lead. No moral appeal changes the outcome. Death ends any debate, and the last man standing wins. The thing that makes the judge scary is that he's right.
I'd also like to add that the shape of Aincrad is actually very reminiscent of Hell from Dante's Inferno, making the journey of the major players like Kirito and Asuna somewhat mirror Dante's. Kayaba even calls himself the Demon King. Were these references intentional? Probably not, but they do tie in perfectly to SAO's themes, and when applied, they give the narrative more layers and add more depth to the overall story. But, you know, you probably already knew that given how deep of an understanding you have of narrative analysis.
Niggas was just down there on the development team like, hey, you know, it'd be kind of cool if we just listen to this nigga and put bombs in these headsets and kill kids, because that's a fantastic idea.
That's a nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
The devs just designed the game. They had no idea about Kayaba's true intentions. The game was run on the Cardinal system, which was created by Kayaba and works independently from the devs. He also fails to meet Sagan's standard as he provides no evidence of complicity or conspiracy, as well as violates Occam's razor by creating an overly complex explanation that this was all a grand conspiracy rather than abiding by the simplest explanation being the correct one, ultimately resulting in a hasty generalization. We even get introduced to Nishida, one of the people who worked on the game, and he himself had no idea about Aincrad's death game aspect, which just goes even further against his point. Also, there are no bombs in the nerve gear. It functions more like a microwave, which Kayaba was much more subtly to sneak into the headset's design, as real-life gaming consoles overheat all the time, hence why they have built-in fans. So this form of tech sabotage is actually surprisingly realistic and believable. I know, watching anime is hard.
This show was already terrible just for this even worse explanation on why the main antagonist would even do this.
Absolutely
Wrong.
Not to mention all the sexual assault scenes on fucking kids, my nigga. Why does the game even allow that? Like, how is it possible that anybody in the show, obviously, would greenlight a game that allows this?
I hear this complaint a lot, and while it is a bit more understandable in later arcs, it's practically non-present in Aincrad for the most part. If he had done any actual research, then he would have known about the ethics code built into the game, which explicitly prevents any non-consensual acts. While some of the stuff with Silica is really weird and uncomfortable, the mob itself isn't actually acting on any sexual desires. The scene he's using is an outlier taken out of context. So not only is he cherry picking, but he's using a non sequitur anyway. And even if it wasn't, everything is controlled by the Cardinal system, which the devs have no control over. Also, you are aware that Kayaba is the antagonist, right? His morality behind his motivation is irrelevant. Like, imagine calling Frieza from DBZ a bad villain, or Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen a bad villain, or Griffith from Berserk a bad villain, because they do not nice things to people. That's literally the entire point. Moral apprehension does not equal bad game design or bad writing. This is another perfect example of Hume's guillotine right here. Also, he uses scenes from Fairy Dance, a totally separate arc taking place in a totally separate game with completely different context behind it, which is a fallacy of composition as well as a non sequitur plus cherry picking. Jesus, the amount of logical fallacies this guy commits genuinely makes my brain hurt. And it's not like he watched the show 10 years ago and just forgot these details. He rewatched the show for the purpose of the video, and he edited the clips. So he's being blatantly dishonest.
I need everyone watching this video right now to close their eyes and count all the fucks the author gave when writing this dog shit.
This is just a blatant violation of Hanlon's razor. Kawahara isn't Shakespeare by any means, but maybe you need to stop calling him a bad writer and actually pay attention to the series you're making a video on. I know, watching anime is hard, and reading is even harder, but I trust y'all's attention spans. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. These arguments and criticisms have already been spreading around the community for a while now. He doesn't really add anything new or insightful to the conversation. However, he specifically said he went out of his way to research any possible explanations to his critiques and still got information wrong. That'd be like saying, I hate Naruto, and went out of my way to read all the guidebooks and interviews with the author, and the Sharingan still doesn't make any sense. I don't expect SAO haters to have an encyclopedia level of knowledge. Most of them only ever watched the show like one time over 10 years ago and then never saw it again. However, the fact that VillainTM said he went out of his way to better understand the show and still came to the same conclusion, despite the fact that the source material literally addresses all of his points, just really irks me. I'm not asking you guys to attack this dude, but if you are going to engage with him, just be civil and politely explain to him why he's wrong. He said he might make a part 2, so I'm assuming he's gonna cover Fairy Dance next, but I'm not gonna make a response to that shit. I actually am in the school of thought that that arc is dog shit. So yeah, that's all. Catch y'all later.